Are we live?
We are live.
Okay, great. Hey everyone, this is Jeff and Hamad. Really excited to spend some time together today. The goal today is to share more about open source at Chroma. So, what does open source mean to us? Why is Chroma open source? How are we going about the process of doing open source, improving open source? And then lastly, we'll have a couple short presentations from some people that have made some significant contributions to the project. All right, let's get into it. Okay, can people see these slides? I assume the answer is yes, but I should double check. Okay, great. All right, so here's the introduction and the agenda. As I mentioned, kind of already talked through this, but we'll do a quick introduction to Chroma. We'll talk about why, so like what is open source? What does open source mean very briefly? Why is Chroma open source? Go through some benefits and challenges of open source, and then talk about our process and how our process is designed to address some of the challenges that open source brings. Then we'll have a short section on contributing to Chroma, as well as the DOs, as I mentioned. Okay, so if you're here, I assume that you already have some level of context into what Chroma is building. But just as a one slide on it, we see our mission to build robust and reliable programmable memory for AI. And today, the way that it is expressed is in this critical piece of the stack, which is an open source vector database. I will avoid a long explanation of vectors and vector databases. But if anybody has questions about this after the fact, obviously feel free to reach out and we can talk all about it. So what is open source? I think this is actually kind of an interesting question in the here and now, because a lot of things are being touted as open source that are not actually open source. In particular, a lot of the language models that are coming out that are being called open source have sort of a fuzzy definition. So I'll let everybody, in the language model community fight about what does and does not deserve the label of open source. But broadly speaking, there are 3 licenses that most people agree are, safe to use, particularly, safe to use commercially. So those 3 licenses are Apache 2, MIT, and then BSD, which has 2 different versions. One is 2 clause and one is 3 clause. So Chroma is Apache 2. Apache 2 is a really popular license. It's used by Google for a lot of their repositories. Again, if people have more detailed questions about like why Apache 2, I'm happy to take that question offline. Okay, why is Chroma open source? That is a very good question. I think ultimately it comes back to, in some ways, like a personal decision from the team that started the project. And we felt that this technology was important enough that it shouldn't live behind a paywall. It should be accessible to every single developer on Earth who wanted to build applications, with language models. And in order for that to be the case, it sort of just had to be free. There was no other way to do it. And we see this as like a larger goal. The larger goal here is, yes, to make a popular project, sure, make a powerful project, make something that people love together in the community. But more broadly, I think we're really excited about the impact this technology, along with language models, can have on the flourishing of humanity. You think about like the applications in healthcare, education, and more. There would be a lot of really good effects from production memory and systems that rely on production memory reaching like the fullness of scale. Aaron, I don't quite understand your comment, but I'd be happy to ask to maybe address it at the end. Okay, so however, with open source projects, they also have this problem where they don't necessarily have a lot of sustainability. So I'm sure that many of you have like used open source software and then something's broken and you go to GitHub and you look at the last commit and it was like 4 years ago. And that's always really discouraging because you think you found something that like really works and is going to stick around. And then you dig under the hood and you realize that it's not. And so, our goal is to make Chroma a ubiquitous open source standard. And, we think it's really important for us to be like incentivized and aligned like, with the community to make something that's going to stand the test of time and be around for a long time. And also have the resources to reinvest back in the open source project to the degree that it requires, and also demand it respects. So, I think that we always want to be very upfront about the fact that there is sort of this like future commercial dimension to Chroma. But like by far the most important thing, the reason that we do this and the reason that we show up every day is because, we believe this technology needs to exist. It needs to be open source. The commercial element is mostly about, making sure that we can make something very sustainable here, and continue to invest in it deeply. Okay, quickly, some benefits of open source. So, you can get a broad developer base. So a lot of people, use the thing. A lot of people use the thing in a lot of contexts. A lot of people use the thing to try to do a lot of different things. And, you end up finding a lot of the edge cases. I think like many of you in the audience are finding a lot of the edge cases in Chroma. So thank you for that. And I appreciate that you report those and we can improve the product. This directly goes into this faster bug detection and fixing. We've also invested a ton in testing. Earlier this year, we spent nearly 2 months designing a very fully featured test harness to try to make sure that we never ship breaking changes unintentionally. In some ways, the only reason we did that was because the community gave us the feedback of, hey guys, breaking changes are not okay. And you're totally right about that. Unintentional breaking changes, I should say. Longevity and continuity. Again, these projects can stand the test of time, can be around for decades and decades to come, and we certainly hope that Chroma is as well as flexibility and customization. You never hit a bug or you never hit a feature and then can't look under the hood. You can always look under the hood, you can always fork it, you can always change it to do exactly what you need it to do, which I think is really great. I obviously, we're developers too, and we always love that about software, that we have the ability to do that. And then, this last point is no vendor lock-in. You can at any point take your data wherever you want. There's no proprietary formats. Nothing's encrypted in a way that locks you in. That would be very anti the spirit of obviously open source. But is for other projects not is the spirit, right? For maybe things that are closed source, they're much more concerned about this like lock-in thing. And this is why open source is good. There are some challenges when it comes to doing open source. Maybe I should say for doing open source well. Anybody can take a GitHub repo and throw it up on GitHub and attach a Apache 2 license. But that does not equate a thriving project. We think that like open source really is mostly, is in some sense a contractual commitment to the community to do things in a certain way. And so, I'm sure as many of you are also developers, a lot of the challenges that you run into using open source are things like quality control, security concerns, the potential for fragmentation, issues around sustainability. We've already talked about that a little bit. Learning curves for new contributors. These are all very valid critiques. We want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we've designed Chroma and specifically the process of open source at Chroma to try to address some of these challenges. Okay, so this is pretty elementary, but we'll take the time here to do it anyways. So Chroma's open source is very GitHub centric today. So we don't have any like listservs or anything like that other projects, sometimes have. All of the code is on GitHub, both the core code base, which includes the first party Python and JavaScript clients, as well as the documentation at a separate repo currently, the /docs repo. Both of these are Apache 2, both of these are open source, and many of you have opened contributions against both of these, and thank you. We use GitHub issues to track bugs and features. I should note, there's no private version of Chroma that the team has. All of our work is done in the open on GitHub. You can go and look at, any pull requests from any, maybe like, core contributor, core team member, and you'll see our back and forth about, hey, we think this is bad, we think this is good, and all that stuff happens in the open. We use GitHub pull requests to review code, and we'll spend a slide in 1 minute on kind of like what we look for in terms of contributions. So I did want to take this moment to thank a lot of our contributors. Now over 70 people have directly contributed code to Chroma since Chroma's launch in February. Here are their names. I did not have time to put all of the avatars in here, though I wanted to. But thank you to you all. It's been really, really fun to like build this with you all, and look forward to work more and more work together. 2 folks on this list. I'm not sure if I can identify their GitHub usernames. Yes, I can actually. So Azarov on the right-hand column there, and then Timothy Carambat, sorry, Tim, are going to spend a little bit of time later sharing about other things that they've built, either kind of in the Chroma broader ecosystem community. So really excited for those presentations. And obviously to the countless others that have provided feedback on either things that are broken, things that are confusing, how to improve things more generally speaking. Even a lot of people have given us feedback on the process, and that's actually I think like why the process is the quality level that it is today is because of people giving us feedback. And so keep it coming. It's essential. It's like the lifeblood of the project. So I wanted to give you all a quick overview to kind of just, and this is obviously a very simplified model, but I think it's helpful to think about like what the code footprint is. And this is obviously especially useful if you're thinking about contributing to Chroma, kind of where the different buckets are to be able to contribute. So broadly speaking, on the left-hand side, you have the data. And then on the right-hand side, the data at rest, right? The data has been written. And then on the right-hand side, you have the application. And then there can be any level of things in between. So the data plane and control plane are sort of requirements of the system. The data plane handles storing the data, handles processing the data, and then the control plane handles things like scaling up and down the system, making sure that everything is online, has the right availability, and these kinds of things. Clients speaks to like the natural language clients. So you can talk to Chroma directly to the HTTP endpoint that Fast API serves. But you can also use like the Python client, the JavaScript client, and obviously now there are lots of clients for Chroma that the community has created. Things like Go, Elixir, Java, Rust, and Ruby, and others. Other people use Chroma inside of another application framework. So for example, LangChain, Llama Index, local GPT, private GPT. There's many like open source kind of applications or other more like kind of business logic frameworks is how I would describe LangChain. And we have integrations with those as well. And again, those integrations are hopefully always getting better. Again, many of the folks in the community really help a lot with like client integrations, and we really appreciate that. And then lastly, there's this bucket kind of below the data plane control plane, which is deployments. So this is another area we'll talk a little bit later about like active areas we're sort of soliciting contributions to the community, but we want to get much better on deployments and make it possible and very easy to deploy Chroma into like a bunch of different contexts. I know that a few people in the community have been asking about deploying to, I think, either Render or Railway, for example. And so, we are kind of working on that now. So types of contributions, and this kind of comes from our like contribution guide on our docs page. So if you go to the docs and then you click on the contributions in the left-hand sidebar, you'll see this list. Actually, a community member suggested this list. And now we've started to use these as a way to tag PRs as like, what is this PR mainly about? So this is a bit, kind of rudimentary, but I think hopefully expands the imagination of like what kinds of contributions, broadly speaking, people are contributing. So there are enhancements or new functionality, bug fixes, certainly, additions or updates to the documentation, additions and updates to tests. We take tests really seriously. We think tests are really important for a data product. Update to the build process or scripts, and performance improvements, also very important. Type annotations. We try to use types fairly extensively throughout both the Python and first-party JavaScript code bases. So we use TypeScript, I guess, actually, in JavaScript land. Code cleanup, always important to be removing code as well as adding code. Your classic kind of thing here is like it's better to remove code than add code. So code cleanup is also always appreciated. And then other maintenance or other tasks that just don't necessarily modify the source or the test files. So this could be updates to readmes or other things like this. And yeah, these are broad categories of contributions. We'll get into specific buckets here in 1 second. I think I skipped a slide. Did I not? Ahmad, did you reorder something? Nope, no. You did not. I lied. I'm fine. Okay. So things we care about in contributions. And I should say broadly, we're always trying to get better as well. Many of us have been engineers for a long time, but we, as a result, always like to continually improve as well. One of the things that we like to say is that Chroma's codebase should be unexpectedly high quality in terms of readability, modularity, and intuitiveness. And so this dedication to craft is something that we take really seriously, and we think will give the project a lot of longevity, and also make it much easier for people to contribute in the future. And so, should you open a PR, and we obviously really encourage folks to get involved in open PRs. Let's see, our general disposition is really excited, and we're really, eager for you to help. We will also, work with you to get the PR in like the best shape possible, so that when it lands in the code base, it maintains the level of craft that the rest of the code has. I think the great part about that is we all get better. The code gets better, and we all get better at building great software. So some a quick bullet list of items here. And I'll go through this quickly so it's not too ad nauseum. But naming things very well. Your classic, the hardest problem in computer science is naming things well. We care about naming things well. Having good tests, especially with anything that deal with data. Obviously, as a data product, like data corruption and losing data is really bad, and we don't want to do that. We are generally okay with breaking changes as long as we communicate them well. And actually, thus far, we've had very few breaking changes. Documentation is only good when it's up to date. I'm sure all of you have used documentation that is not up to date with the underlying code, and it's just incredibly frustrating. And that's not the experience that we think that Chroma should, deliver. Error messages should be appropriate, friendly, and helpful. Migrations when necessary. Some of you may have used Chroma before 0.4 and then used Chroma after 0.4. And hopefully you noticed that we spent a bunch of time in making this Chroma migrate utility. Actually, Hamad specifically made this Chroma migrate utility, including a CLI to make it as easy as possible and seamless as possible for people to migrate data. Migrating data can be incredibly painful, and it is necessary sometimes. But again, we want to have this commitment to making it as easy as possible. Privacy. So, Chroma has telemetry. The telemetry is guaranteed to be anonymized. We take that extremely seriously. It's very easy to turn off as well. We want to make sure that any new code or contributions to Chroma maintains those guarantees, because trust is frankly the most important thing that we have as a project. And we will never risk that. Similarly, security, being thoughtful about the dependencies that we choose, and just in general minimizing the attack surface on the project. And then lastly, licensing. So obviously, Chroma is Apache 2, so we don't want to depend on projects that are GPL. Things that would infect the code base are not good. And so, I think we need to be thoughtful about, again, dependencies and making sure that we're using other truly open source software. But again, kind of to wrap this up, I think that, we care a lot about the craft of the code. We encourage contributions, and I think we'll all get better together by working together, which is also fun. Okay, this is my last slide, I believe. Hermod, are we going to hit this slide, or are we going to hit the next slide?
No, I'm happy to take it.
Okay, great.
Yeah, cool. So basically, we want to talk a little bit about the process for contributing to Chroma and open source. I think broadly, we have those buckets that Jeff mentioned, enhancements, bugs, documents, test updates. But also, we've been thinking a lot about how to help the community deliver larger and larger changes to Chroma. And one thing that we noticed is it was quite hard to make a substantial change to Chroma in a way that aligned with the long-term goals of the project, but also with the level of craft and care that we want to put into every API addition or change that we make, and also while maintaining performance for that API change. So we've introduced this new process. Called chips. So chips are CIP's Chroma improvement proposals, are a way to make a formal proposal to Chroma at the project. Slides are oscillating back and forth here. To make Chroma, to make a suggestion on how to improve Chroma, and we'll get concretely into what that actually means in a few slides from here. Yeah, like I was mentioning, there's probably a few places that we're trying to foster conversation around Chroma. The first is through chips, and I'll get into how exactly these work in a second. The second is just an issue. So if you have, a problem with Chroma or something you want to change, or a bug that you're running into, please always open an issue. We try to make the issue process as lightweight as possible, and we're actually even trying to make it more lightweight in the future. And then also join our Discord. I think many people here are only here because of Discord, but if you're not already, please join Discord. We have feature ideas and feature ideas chat, which are places where you can post ideas you have around Chroma, and then also just have a conversation around that feature with other people in the community. And many times we found that actually many people want the same feature out of Chroma, and they're actually having an excellent back and forth on what exactly is the right shape of that feature inside of Chroma. So what are chips? The thing I just mentioned. So chips are a way to propose new features or changes to Chroma. They stand for Chroma improvement proposals. A chip should provide a concise technical specification of the feature and also a rationale for why it's needed. And if you're curious what exactly that looks like, feel free to hop onto the GitHub and search CIP. And you'll notice like we've had, I think, 5 outstanding chips to date. And so far, that process has been going really well. And sometimes also, if you want, you should feel free to include a prototype of the actual thing that you're hoping to contribute to Chroma along with the chip itself. Just at a high level, there's sort of 3 phases when you write a chip. The first is when we actually first start taking a look at it, we'll mark it as under review. If we decide, the core Chroma team and any adjacent community members that decide to hop in on the conversation, if we all agree that this is something that is worth pursuing and is both technically correct from both a performance and API design standpoint, but also just a API that we actually care to maintain and support over the long-term life of the project, then we will accept it. And then once it's finally implemented, we will mark it as implemented. Of course, if for some reason we have to reject your proposal, which we only ever do if we think that it truly doesn't align with what we're trying to accomplish, then it'll get marked as rejected. So far we've already, we released this process, I think like 2 weeks ago. We've had 5 community contributed chips. The first is filtering for collections. The second is authentication, which Trayan, or you'll see him on Discord as Taz, we'll talk about later today. And then also embedding function, max token detection, in and not in filtering, which we just recently accepted and has now moved to the implementation stage. And then pagination for list collections, which we're still working through the exact technical implementation of, but is making good progress. So as you can see, this is a great way to, if you have an idea for how to make Chroma better, concretely contribute it in a way that allows us to make sure that you're not going to waste time. That's really the goal of this process, is to make sure that the community has a way to collaborate with one another and maximize the use of everyone's time and maximize the chance of success for a given idea or project by sort of engaging everyone to hammer the idea into shape and hammer the technical implementation into shape. So hopefully, if you have an idea, you'll take on this way of doing things. If you want to learn even more, follow the link on our docs to contributing with chips, and it'll explain everything, or just DM one of us on Discord and we'll be happy to walk you through how to land the chip. I'll also take a moment to talk a little bit about the release process, which is, I think, an important part of open source, which is like, how do we actually release the thing? And so just for everyone's knowledge, we try to release Chroma every week on Monday. We do sometimes slip when we're trying to land a big feature, but for the most part, things will land on Monday. And then during the week, if we have urgent hotfixes, they'll always get cherry picked onto a release branch and deployed as a minor patch version. The JS client and Python client are always released in lockstep. We try and not let those things move out of sync with one another. And then breaking changes, our commitment to you is that we will always communicate them. Of course, that is the bare minimum. We will also always try and provide an easy path to migrate. Whether that's like a tool that identifies where in your code the API is breaking and how to modify your code to change it, or whether it's a data format migration and we actually give you a seamless tool to migrate the data format. We take migrations really seriously. We want to minimize the downtime or service time on your implementation or use of Chroma. And we always try and build tooling to make sure that it's as seamless as possible. Broadly, both for our GitHub process, the chips proposal process, as well as our release process, all of these things and more, we're open to feedback. We've only built things into the way that they exist today because of the feedback of you all, because of the feedback of the community. And we welcome even more feedback, whether it be through GitHub, whether it be through email, or whether it be through Discord DMs, whatever channel you find appropriate. I've even had someone find my phone number on the internet and text me ideas about Chroma, which is creepy, but also welcome. If you can do that, then I encourage you to do it, I guess. So please keep in touch in all ways that you find feasible, and we will always be open to your feedback on how to make Chroma the product, as well as the processes that drive the open source community around it better over time. I'm also going to talk a little bit, to shift gears for a second, about the roadmap for Chroma, what we want to focus on over the next coming months as the core team of Chroma, but also what we are hoping the community will have an interest in, and what we think the highest leverage areas are for us to make Chroma better in the near term. So the core team's focus over the next quarter is a distributed version of Chroma. Chroma, as you all know, is really good for in-memory and single node deployments, but that doesn't work if you need to scale your data up past a single node. So what we're working on right now is a distributed version of Chroma that allows you to scale data past a single node. And that will also be the exact same code base that we deploy to offer a hosted version of Chroma. So many people in the community have been asking for a hosted version of Chroma. They like the Chroma interface, they like the API, they like the tooling around Chroma, but they don't want to manage the burden of operationalizing and deploying Chroma into their own production environments. And they want us to do that for them. Which is exactly what we're doing and what we intend to do over the coming months. So we're working on a free technical preview. That's the initial release that we will hopefully get to in the next couple of months, which is you'll be able to use a deployed version of Chroma for free with some boundaries around, of course, how much data you can store, given that it's free. And our other focus, besides the core distributed version of Chroma and the hosted offering, is we want to add a bunch of ease of use features, ingestion tools, performance improvements, and things of that sort. Basically, what we're really focused on is you have this data, you're trying to use this data in tandem with the language model. How can we help you get the most out of that data with respect to your model? How can we help you understand how to make your data better? How can we help you bring in other sources of data? And how can we help you use that data faster just by making Chroma faster? So ripe areas for contributions from the open source community. This is just sort of a grab bag of ideas, but of course, if you have ideas past this, we're always welcome to them. But some things we've been particularly interested in is integrations with other embedding providers. So there's new embedding models coming out all the time, and we're quite interested in learning from you about new embedding models. There's also been multimodal embedding models coming out, things that embed images, things that embed videos. We're also really interested in those. Also, orchestration and application logic frameworks like LangChain and Llama Index. There's new ones of those coming out all the time, and we love learning about them because they propose interesting and valuable abstractions. And then also, we think that helping those tools use Chroma only helps people that use those tools. And so if you have one of those that you use, but it doesn't have Chroma support, we'd love to see additions of Chroma support for those. Integrations with open source apps like Private GPT, Local GPT, and Auto GPT. Just broadly other applications in the open source community that use a vector index. I think that those are great areas for contribution as plugging Chroma into those. Another one is deployment schemes. So we have a ton of people who have been trying to deploy Chroma on slightly more niche providers, as well as like slightly more established providers and running into issues. So I think a great area of contribution for people with a more DevOps mind an infrastructure mind is examples of how to deploy these things on Google, on AWS, and on smaller providers like Railway, Render, and the like. And then lastly, we're also really interested in hearing about new language clients. I think this is to date the most broadly already, the already most established area of contribution. And I think the one that is always exciting is people contributing many different clients for different languages. And I think that's always great for people with specific language skills. And then finally, evaluation tools. So we're really interested in, again, what I was just mentioning, which is how you have some data, how do you get more out of it over time? How do you make your data better? How do you fine tune the embedding model? So we have a bunch of ideas here. And if you're curious about these things and perhaps you have a data science background or a machine learning background, please reach out and we'll talk with you about some of our ideas, or would love to hear about some of the ideas you have around how to evaluate the performance of Chroma, like in a qualitative sense and also in a quantitative sense, and then how can we help people have tools both to do their own evaluation, but also to leverage that evaluation in making their embedding models or their vector search more powerful for their use case. And why participate at all? Like, why do this? Why are people doing this? I'm also curious to hear from other people in the community. Drop in the chat. Why do you contribute to Chroma if you do? These are a couple reasons that I think I've heard from the community that I found inspiring. So the first is impact. Chroma is used by today hundreds of thousands of developers a month and tens of thousands of developers a day. It's early in its life still, so there's a ton of room for growth. And the product is fairly nascent. It's only been live for a couple of months, and there's a lot of room to have a huge impact on a piece of technology that is being widely used by many developers and also then downstream in many applications. It's also a chance to up-level your skills. Especially as part of the core team, I think the process of open source just pushes us to be better engineers when we engage with the community and they show us new ways of doing things, or vice versa. Just the open review process of the open source project helps you get better as an engineer. And I think that's always valuable in your career, but also just as a skill level up. And lastly, because it's fun. I think broadly, just working on open source is cool. It's cool that as a software community, we've decided that we have this concept of open source, that we're going to release software for free on the internet, and we're going to share it in the spirit of openness and in the spirit of collaboration. I think that's an incredibly fun ideology to work around and with, and hopefully you do too. So yeah, thank you. We have a couple of demos right after this, but like I mentioned, please feel free to always reach out via Discord, Twitter, email any of us. All of our emails are our first names at trychroma.com, around how we can improve the project, how we can improve the process, or how we can improve the community. So we're going to move over to a few demos. I think we have Tim, who's going to share VectorAdmin, which is a super cool UI interface for connecting to vector databases and exploring and managing your data. So I'm going to invite Tim on stage. And cool. Hey, Tim.
Hey. So first off, thanks for making the time to have me come up on the stage, and also just for everybody's kind of collaboration on Chroma. It's an amazing product, and I'm just glad to be a part of it, exactly, because it is fun. What I wanted to present today, which I'll just share my screen, so not to take up too much of everyone's time. And let's see, okay, should be sharing now. And I'm gonna go to GitHub. This is a open source, kind of, I would say, like graphical user interface for managing vector data in a application sense. So one of the problems that we kind of came across when we were using Chroma, or have other clients or customers of ours that also use Chroma, is the management of the data. I think Chroma has a beautiful API as a developer, and anyone who's a developer in the crowd can relate to. It's just super simple to use, but sometimes people like to see things. And so that is what this project was all about. It's more of a user interface, but also wanting to be a tool suite. And I'll get more into that at the end of this. So just for some context, I actually have a Chroma instance running on AWS right now, just because I wanted to show that all of this can be done locally, of course, but it can also be done on the cloud. And so I have an instance running here with an API gateway, and I used the Chroma Cloud Formation document to do this. And then this is another product we have called Anything LLM. It's a chat with your document solution. And of course, it integrates with Chroma as well. The reason I'm showing you this is I just wanted to showcase that here in my Chroma database currently, I have two what we call workspaces, or what Chroma can call a collection. And so we have two collections here. One contains a single document about how to deploy Chroma on AWS. And you can see when I integrate this with the OpenAI GPT-3 model, I am able to read this document using the semantic searchability of Chroma. And then I also have another that's about Anything LLM. And so you can see that the model here is working. There are 4 indices or vectors, same thing. And so I just wanted to show that the database is live, it is on AWS, and it does have data in it. Now, this is actually VectorAdmin. I've already gone through the process of signing in and basically doing the onboarding. This is more of a management tool. You can, of course, run this locally or run this on the cloud. I have this running on a subdomain on AWS right now. And what I wanted to showcase today was I have an existing Chroma instance. It has data in it. How can I see the actual data that is in this database? All of it as well, whether you have 100 vectors or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. We have some customers that are using this that have like 200,000 documents. So the first thing I need to do is connect the database, and we have the instance URL, which, if anyone's familiar with how this process works of connecting using the regular client. And then there's also this method for authentication, which is also probably going to change because I know that that is a CIP that's being worked on. So what we'll do is we'll connect to a vector database. You'll see that we are connected, and I'll have to refresh this because, you know, it's a beta product, right? And no demo ever goes perfectly. But there's a button for sync Chroma data. I'm just going to click this. I'm going to synchronize embeddings. And now, because we only have 4 vectors, this job should complete nearly instantly. And you can see that we have 2 spaces, 2 collections that were found. And actually, we reassembled the documents on the front end to where I can know, oh, in this workspace or collection, we wanted to normalize the name because we integrate also with other vector vector database providers, sorry. And so one of the advantages of using this UI over just, querying the endpoint is that all of the data is in here, but also there are special tools that we'll be adding. Not to mention that you can also add documents directly through the interface here by just uploading them. There is a whole document parser that will allow you to upload PDFs, text documents, and all of that. So let's go focus on the anything LLM collection that I have. If I change it over time, I can sync it, or it can sync automatically. But a cool thing is I can actually clone documents. And this is actually really interesting because cloning in this tool actually does not charge you, again, for re-embedding. The vectors are actually cached, which is what this metric is up here. So this is actually the size of the storage on this instance of the vectors you've already embedded. And as I've said, we have customers with 5 gigabytes of just vector storage. And what this allows you to do is be able to very quickly go into a document, clone it to a different collection, not have to pay to re-embed it, but also you can see every single vector in the space, delete the entire document, delete a single vector ID, and also see the text chunk that was embedded. Now, right now, this tool is specifically geared towards the document ingestion kind of model that exists. So metadata is really important. So if you're not using metadata in Chroma, first off, what are you doing? But second off, this tool might not be a good fit for what you're working with. But in the future, it will just be pretty agnostic to the shape of your data. But also a cool feature is you can also atomically edit independent chunks of your data, which if I could hit this handler, that'd be great. And so I can go and, I can go and change the text inside of here specifically, and that will automatically sync to Chroma and also then change the outputs of my LLM interface or whatever kind of application you might be using. And that's a very short demo. There's user management. So you can have multiple users that can see multiple organizations, which is kind of how we atomically split giant clusters of vector databases. There's account creation, debug stuff. It integrates with OpenAI right now, and we'd like to integrate with others. And that is essentially VectorAdmin in a nutshell. In the future, we'd like to add a lot more tools, but this is just kind of the V0.0.1. And of course, it is open source, so happy to have contributions and just other people's feedback as we kind of focus on the application layer. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. What's next for VectorAdmin? What are you all working on next?
So one of the most fascinating tools that we want to integrate as soon as possible is having an ability to unit test your collections on Chroma. So if you have a collection of documents, it's kind of a black box of how LLMs work and also how they integrate with the context retrieval in Chroma. So it would be nice to have a unit test that maybe runs once a day, once a document is uploaded, where you have a fixed prompt that you expect an answer to look like something. And if you add a document, all of a sudden your answer is crazy, you would want to know. And so that is one thing that I'm very excited about, just as a developer, especially having this anything LLM chatbot and having built some other AI chatbots. The non-deterministic nature of just, hey, what's going to happen is pretty frustrating. So that's one of the tools we'd like to add. But yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I look forward to that feature. And thanks for all your work on VectorAdmin and also just with Chroma and the community and broadly. If you haven't looked, Tim has a really cool YouTube channel where he explains all sorts of things related to AI development and AI engineering, but also has some great videos on Chroma, and we're extremely thankful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, y'all make it easy. Y'all make it easy. I do. Right. Y'all are doing the hard part. Scaling a vector database is not an easy task. So thank you for your time. I'll hop off and let Trayan take the stage.
Thanks, Tim. All right, now we're going to call up Trayan, and he's going to walk us through some of the work he's been doing with authentication and a few other. And Trayan is a machine, so he's been shipping a ton of things to Chroma, and we're quite excited to have him talk about.
Hey everyone.
Hi. I'll let you take it from here, Trayan.
Hey, can you hear me? Not sure. Am I audible? Okay, great. All right. So hi. maybe brief introduction. I'm by trade, I'm a software architect, cloud native, and mostly enterprise. But I think that time has come for me at least to do some to give back a little bit, and I found home with Chroma community and the Chroma team. So yeah, I've been, let's say, giving it my all, because right now I'm doing a little bit of a hiatus from business world, and I think what the Chroma team has built is fantastic, and I'm really excited to continue contributing, I guess. So without further ado, well, I mean, I guess the biggest thing that I've been working on lately it's the authentication. It's an early piece of work. So let me share my screen, and maybe coming from an architect background, I can walk you guys through a diagram of what we have started building really here. All right, I hope you can see my screen. So very briefly, we had discussions on how to implement this, how to make it really easy. I mean, I know that here it might look a little bit too complicated, but bear with me. It's a lot of abstractions mainly, so that we can make things pluggable in the future. And well, I mean, as you can see, we have a bunch of adapters on the client side that provide quite nice way of plugging new authentication providers. Right now, we're just focusing on the bare minimum, or the basics, like basic authentication, tokens, and so on. One important thing to note here, I guess, for authentication is that right now it might seem like, okay, where's the authorization part? And that's also something that's coming. It's going to take a little bit of time because we need to think it through as well. So for now, we're just giving you like the base layer of security to secure the whole instance, the whole Chroma instance. But I guess in the future, especially with the distributed version coming along, well, we'll be looking to add also authorization layer on top of all this, and of course support everything that's new and trendy out there, MTLS or IDC, whatever you name it. If it's something that helps developers, for sure that will be in Chroma. In terms of demo, I'll be very quick because I know we're a little bit short on time. So I know that it looks a little bit intimidating, but in terms of actual configuration, we've tried, and I hope we've hit home with this one. But again, we'd like some community feedback on this to figure out whether the abstractions and the configurations that we've built are going the right direction. And this is, you can hop on Chroma's documentation page, and here you can basically read well, all there is for the authentication as it is right now. And you can see that, yeah, getting started with this is pretty simple. You on the client, on the server side, you need to just specify a few parameters, like where your credentials files are, what your credential provider is, and then of course what the authentication provider is. Right now, as you can see, we're supporting just basic authentication, which is not great, but again, coupled with maybe with SSL on top of it, you can make it work. It's pretty simple, as you can see here. You can I'll just hop on my IDE and just get started. We're going to just start in Docker. I'm just displaying everything that's printed out, so yeah, you can see that there is nothing. Things are running, so yeah. And then out of that, it's pretty straightforward to get going. I mean, this means you already have your server side set up. Pretty easy that we've made this, and then, well, simple as this, you just specify your provider and your credentials. Right now, this, as you can see here, you can provide it as settings to your client, HTTP client. But then we also support environment variables if that's something you'd like. So the Pydantic base settings, they do support environment variables. So whichever way you like, you can do. And then we have a bunch of, we've added also concepts that not explicitly exposed, but we have also added the concepts of ignored paths. So we have a few public endpoints which we don't necessarily want to protect via authentication, like heartbeat and get versions, because that's important for, well, depending on your deployment. Well, there are health monitoring systems that rely on these, and they don't necessarily support authentication mechanisms. So as you can see, yeah, we have this, and if I do run it, I will get here my list of collections. Right now, there's just one test collection, so not much going on. And for the, I guess, the negative test case, that's pretty simple. You will not be specifying any parameters to this. So we'll be attempting to just send like an empty, well, no authentication at all, for that matter. And yeah, then you will get like a 401 unauthenticated error. That's pretty simple. But I guess what's coming here is we're looking at adding a lot more, I'd say, modern or interesting scenarios for authentication, and as I mentioned, authorization as well. So I think that's pretty much it. I mean, other than that, well, you can find me on Discord. I'm really happy to discuss, and that some of you may already talk to me in the past about your use cases. I mean, as I said, I'm an architect by trade, so if you do have a use case about Chroma, just feel free to get in touch, and I'll be happy to help you. And yeah, I mean, I have a few other small contributions. I don't know how much did we agree. Do you want me to share that? But I guess you can jump into the showcase your work on Discord and check them out there. I mean, the Java client, the Go client, and of course, I think the more interesting one would be the Kubernetes chart, which well, for project I was involved in, there was a requirement that Chroma was deployed on in Kubernetes. So yeah, there you go. I think that's that pretty much wraps it up for me.
Cool, thank you, Trayan. I think what's cool about this is this is something that was initially just an idea that Trayan had. He wrote a chip. We worked together to make it something that worked for the Chroma community, and it was really fun collaborating with you on this. And thank you for bearing with my 60 PR comments and addressing all of them.
No,
but
no problem. I mean, I know these processes can take time, and I guess, well, as time goes on and this matures, it might get a little bit slower, but I think it's for the benefit of the community. So
yeah, and I think it just speaks to the power of why we're building Chroma in open source, which is we get excellent ideas and contributions from people all over. And yeah, Trayan's also submitted a bunch of other stuff to Chroma. So if you need Kubernetes support, I think the GitHub repo that Trayan's been publishing them all under is acmos-tech. Is that correct, Trayan?
Yeah, I can ping anyone, or you can go to Discord, showcase your work, and you can find it there. Or find me on Discord, and we can have a chat about deployments and all that, especially in Kubernetes, as you can see.
he brought the appropriate swag. The Kubernetes.
Sorry, I didn't get my my Chroma shirt, so sorry about that, Jeff.
Yeah, it's on the way. It's on the way. Cool. Well, thank you, Trayan. I think we're going to open it up to questions from the community now. Is that right, Jeff?
All right.
Cool. So if you have any questions, any Q&A, we're happy to take them. Please drop your question in the chat.
Yeah. Maybe while we wait, I knew that Aaron asked a question earlier in the chat, which was like kind of what inspired the team to work on Chroma, and I'd love to share more. Both me and Anton and also Hamad, frankly, had all worked in applied AI, applied machine learning contexts. And one of the big frustration points that we had was how hard it was to go from demo to production. It seemed like creating a demo, if you had clean data, was pretty easy, but going to a robust, reliable system that you wanted to depend on in production was extremely hard. And I think that, broadly speaking, it's because the current tool set feels more like alchemy than it does like engineering. And we think for it to, become a widely useful piece of technology, not just Chroma, but like, the large model, language model world writ large. For it to become, a useful technology, it needs to be very reliable and programmable. So I would say like at Chroma, we're very early in the life cycle and the arc of a bunch of ideas we have about like what it means to create programmable memory for AI. But we feel broadly that being able to deterministically set the memory and also be able to interpret and look inside the memory of an AI system at any given point in time and be able to change it and edit it is an incredibly valuable tool to, again, building like production, reliable, robust systems. So yeah, that's why we're working on this. Hamad, do you want to join stage and field Mark's question?
Yeah, I think to answer Mark's question, we think it went well. We didn't get any feedback that indicated otherwise. So we tried to provide a easy to use tool, Chroma-migrate, that allowed you to sync data from one to another instance of Chroma really easily. So I think it went fairly well. I think any data migration is hard. I think if we had to revisit that decision to change the data format, one thing that we perhaps could have done better, in the interest of always trying to do better, was make it so that the data migration didn't require re-indexing all your data, which has made the data migration quite slow. Like obviously we would have preferred to sort of take advantage of the wasted compute that already went into indexing the data. One thing I like to think about every day when I wake up is how many CPU hours are being burnt in indexing vectors around the world, and how can we spend less CPU hours indexing vectors. So I'm sure that we probably could have, spent less CPU hours and burned a few less fossil fuels in pursuit of indexing vectors. But I think all things considered, it went pretty well. And now we have some better ideas for how to do it if it ever happens in the future, although we don't anticipate that. And then I think we have a question from SW, which is any updates on the hosted solution? We're going as fast as we can. And hopefully we'll have more to share soon. But anything you want to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, nothing to add to that. We could kind of rush ahead here and take like the single node version of Chroma that exists today and create a hosted service around it. But it wouldn't be very scalable, and it wouldn't give ultimately the developer experience that we think is necessary. It couldn't be serverless. You'd have to have this like always on compute, like pay for what you use. And so anyways, we think that like this distributed version has to exist. It'll be open source, as we've said. And I think what we've tried to do is, in everything we do, try to do it with a surprisingly, unexpectedly high degree of quality, and even if that means taking a bit longer. And so, yeah, thank you for your patience. We're working on it really hard, as the mod said. Yeah, I mean, certainly before the end of the year, we want to get it out the door if not sooner. So.
And one thing I might add is if you're very eager for a hosted solution, we will, in a couple of months, have early versions ready. And like one thing we definitely want to do is like trial with people and like give them access to it before it's quite ready for broad rollout. So we have a wait list on our core website that you can sign up for, but also if you're extremely eager and you're okay with a lot of rough edges, aka we might lose your data while we're building the initial versions because we're just not actively putting thought into that part of it. Please DM us and like we can have you try it. Tell us what the experience is like. Tell us what the performance is like. What the rough edges are. That's something that we do want to start doing. And so yeah, if you're really eager, DM me and we'll let you know what our timelines are for like a very, very, very early hazard sign preview of Chroma. Cool.
Awesome. Any other questions from the community, from the audience? All right. Well, we'll wrap it there. Thanks everybody for joining today and listening to this. We will be posting the recording on Discord and on Twitter. So if you want to check it back out, anything you missed, revisit any slides, it'll all be there. And yeah, thanks again. Thanks for the time, everybody. Great to see you all.